I just read the bio on the 4th Judicial District page, saying that this was your third term serving as district attorney. Is that accurate? You started serving in 2008, I believe?
I won the election in 2008 and took office January 2009. So it's 2009 to 2020, or 2021, I guess, I leave office January 11th.
Right, gotcha. And then also before that,
12 years. Yeah.
12 years, and before that, you worked 36 years here in the 4th Judicial District.
I've worked a total of probably 34 years here.
Oh, okay.
I ran for office in 2004 and lost, and I was in the office, wasn't quite as welcome as I was before. So I became head of the county courts for Carroll Chambers up in the 18th, which is Douglas, Arapahoe, it's immediately north. Actually, two little counties also out there, Albert and Lincoln. And so I was in charge of all their county courts up there for 4 years. I then ran in 2008 again and won, and came back and was here for the last 12 years. So I guess the first stint would have been 22 years and then 12 years. 22 years and 12 years for a total of 34 here, 38 as a prosecutor.
Right, and then this is going to be kind of like a big question, but out of all those cases that you've done and everything, is there an estimate of how many cases do you think you've been a part of in your time here in the 4th Judicial District? If you could give an estimate, give a guess, how many cases do you think you've been a part of?
I've been, probably thousands of cases. We are the biggest DA's office in the state of Colorado. Last year we handled 35,000 cases. Everybody thinks I did every one of those myself. We have 90 highly qualified attorneys here that handle really almost all of those. There are certain cases that have to be run by me. There are certain cases I personally am handling, but I can only handle a couple of years out of those, and they're usually very high profile. But I've done at least 20 murder trials over my career. I've handled a lot more murder cases than that. My individual attorneys handle the murder cases here, but they can't deal with any of them without running them by me. So there are certain cases, high profile, every homicide, that they have to run by me. So I get involved in those cases at a certain level. Actually, I've been on-call deputy, where you get called out to crime scenes. Yeah. I think the law enforcement agencies were like, "You're on call tonight," when the elected DA came out to cover a homicide that happened for our office. But I can bring a certain experience a lot of other people don't have. Finally, I had to cut that out about a year and a half ago, because the whole idea is to go out to the crime scene is you know that case from the beginning, you know the witnesses, you know the crime scene, and that really helps you in the courtroom later when you're trying the case. But I knew starting about a year and a half ago I wouldn't be able to complete those cases to trial, so I finally had to get off call, which was kind of disappointing for me, because I enjoy getting out there working with young officers, old officers, some I know, some I don't, and it's a lot of fun. But yeah, probably thousands of cases. I don't know if that helps you.
No, it definitely does, and that's kind of leads to my next question of, with just, serving all this time and everything like that, what would you say is probably, kind of, like we were talking about, a lot of work has to be done for this, but what was kind of your favorite part about, being the district attorney? What was the most enjoyment that you kind of got out of this position?
I got to tell you, I really appreciate the people of this district voting me into office and entrusting me this position. It really is an honor to have that. But I got to tell you, in terms of directly to your question, because I feel in this job I've never really worked a day in my life. This really has been my passion. I originally came over to the DA's office. I was hired by Bob Russell, who this building is named after. I thought I'd be here 3 to 5 years, get some good experience and become a good trial attorney, maybe make a reputation, be someone who is marketable and could be hired by a firm here in the city. I just love this job. Doing public service, giving back to the community, fighting for the right things, doing the right thing every day. The DA is required to do justice, which is defined as doing the right thing every day. That's a great job to have. It's a great job to have everybody else in this office having that same mission. So I'm working with a great group of people here that I just wouldn't be able to get anywhere else. We work as a team. We all work to get justice. We all work to do the right thing, and that's a great environment to work in. So it's really been enjoyable giving back to the community, feeling like you're giving back to something greater than yourself, having an influence on young attorneys and trying to bring them up in a very ethical way, in a very public service way, and also being dedicated to doing the right thing.
Right.
So,
and like
did that answer your question?
No, 100%. Because you said, it's like, it's a great feeling to, go into work and say it doesn't feel like you're working going into it. So. Oh yeah,
I've said, by the way, I get 3 years into it, and I was hooked.
Oh really? Yeah.
I was not going to leave. I have to admit, when I proposed to my wife, Part of the proposal was I'm going to stay in the DA field. I'm not going to make the big bucks that people get out in private practice, but it's a love and a passion I want to do, so you need to know we're not going to be real rich. She still accepted.
There you go.
And we've been married since 1986, so 4 years less than I've been a prosecutor.
There you go, there you go. And then,
although we dated for a long time.
There you go. Hey, totally fine, totally fine. Which kind of leads to my next question. I don't know if there are, I tried Googling it, and I guess I'm not the best Googler. Are there term limits for DA? Why not run for re-election?
We passed term limits actually in the state of Colorado for almost all of our elected officials.
Okay.
DAs actually weren't included in that. So there was a question whether they should be. So there were a group of DAs at the time. I wasn't a DA at the time, but there were a group that actually brought a hearing in court to determine whether we were under term limits, because we're specifically not. The Supreme Court ruled otherwise. They said, yeah, DAs are under term limits. So DAs have two 4-year terms of 8 years. The local voters can vote that actually greater or smaller if they want. I don't know if they can go, probably can go smaller, but they can give you more terms if they want. Since I've been DA, it was actually put on the ballot to extend to 3 terms for this office, and the voters did that. So I'm kind of unique. Most DAs are maximum 8 years. Here in the 4th, it's a maximum 12 years, and I have served 12 years. Pueblo actually got rid of their term limit altogether. They could, they could vote theirs, but we're the only 2 that I'm aware of that have that.
Gotcha. And like you said, this is such a fulfilling job, but you have, it's kind of time to move on to the other thing. But what's kind of your plans after this? Do you plan on staying in Colorado Springs? Do you plan on moving? Do you plan on opening your own practice or going into another office? What's kind of the plans for you?
I'm going to stay around here. I love this community. I was born in Minnesota, but I grew up, I'm a product of District 11, went to Billy Mitchell High School, and I just love this community. So I'll be staying in the community. Right now, my plans are to do nothing. I've been doing a lot for a while, and quite frankly, the DA is on call 24/7. Even if I'm on vacation somewhere, if something comes up, if it's a major thing, I'm going to be canceling my vacation. I was actually off on Black Friday when Planned Parenthood happened. Well, I'm coming in Black Friday when that's going to occur. And unfortunately, most things seem to happen after bars close. In terms of getting a lot of those calls. So I'm looking forward to doing nothing for a while. So January 12th, I do not intend to open a private practice. I intend to do nothing for a while.
There you go, just a little bit of relaxing.
I'm looking to
I
relax.
think you deserve it.
I've been taking some golf lessons. I've joined a fishing club. I've done some things like that.
There you go. And let's talk a little bit about those high-profile cases. Like I said, I've been here for 3 years, so I kind of know a little, at least the cases that I've covered, that you've been a part of and everything like that. But I kind of want to hear from you first. If you could maybe bullet point, or what do you think have been like the major cases that you've been a part of, here at the 4th Judicial, District?
Well, since I've been the elected district attorney, certainly the Black Forest fire happened while I was here. The Waldo Canyon fire happened when I was here. Actually, I went up to the Waldo Canyon to the point of origin. That was kind of interesting, as we're going up Waldo Canyon, and you're going up with these FBI agents and Forest Service people, and people are real experts in arson. And we're partway up the trail, and they're saying, how can you keep talking? And I'm like, you guys aren't used to the altitude. As we went up there to see where that all started. But I've also had, Tom Clements, who was head of the DOC, was murdered here in our jurisdiction, and we had that investigation. Planned Parenthood, now that case is pending, so I can't comment on it, and he's innocent until proven guilty beyond a reasonable doubt. The Barrett case up in Woodland Park was another major one we had. We had the Halloween shootings. I don't know if you were here when someone was just randomly walking down the street.
That was the year before I got here. I remember that. Yes.
Didn't hear as much about that one because the officers shot and killed the perpetrator before he could kill more people. I mean, he was just on a rampage at that point. So they acted very appropriately. The officers did. Trying to think of some of the others. The Stout one is now pending. That'll be really Michael Allen's, and again, that one's pending, so I can't really comment. And again, that person's presumed innocent unless until proven guilty beyond a reasonable doubt. Right. That's some off the top of my head.
No, those were kind of the ones big ones I had too.
I think that's you can think of, Howard.
What about the other one that I because this was one that I first started, was Malik Murphy. I forget how old he was. I think he was 19-year-old. He killed his little brother and sister. Dad came and tried to stop him. Were you a big part of that one?
Amy Fitch, as I recall, was my lead prosecutor on that case. And that got resolved, I think, with a plea bargain on that case. But yeah, like I say, I would have consulted with her throughout the case, and then any ultimate decisions I would have had to okay.
Gotcha, yeah.
So those cases I keep, real tabs on, even if it's not personally my case.
Definitely. And then if it's okay, I just want to hop in 2 questions because I think we can't talk there in regards to 2 cases that you mentioned. Like you said, we can't really comment on them, so I'm just going to throw those questions out there and we'll just kind of get them out of the way if that's okay with you. Starting with Robert Deere, this is a case that's been going on for, it seems like forever. The whole competency, everything like that. Then it goes to the federal level. They're still kind of running into the same issues. Is that something that still kind of maybe frustrates you to this day, that here's this case, the man admitted to it, he's gone through the process, but it still keeps struggling to move past a point? Is that still frustrating to you that this happened? It was a very tragic day here in Colorado Springs, and it still hasn't been resolved?
Excuse me, 2 things I have to be cautious about when we talk about a pending case. Number 1, it is pending, so there are certain restraints I have on what I can say. Number 2, that particular one has a court order indicating also what things I'm allowed to say or not say. I can say things that are on the public record, and there are certain things that we put on that are on the public record. Certainly the defense has maintained that he's incompetent. Certainly we've maintained he is competent. It has been put on the public record that at one point he was teaching the competency class down at the state hospital. It is something that we have been seeking to get us back into court and get that case going. I can tell you, I did tell the victims in that case that it would take, right in the beginning, it'll take at least 3 to 5 years to resolve this case. You could see it was going to be kind of one of those long-term cases, which is, anytime it is, justice fails when it's not done in an appropriate time period. So that one is getting stretched out, and you do worry about things like that. The feds actually stepped into the case, and we appreciated that they did. Just before Thanksgiving, the judge ordered a competency evaluation in that case. The judge, in her order, orally at least, I don't know what she put in writing, but I listened to the open court proceedings, noted that he really hadn't had a competency evaluation for almost 2 years. And so that was, or at least a year to 2 years. That's one of the reasons she said, I'm ordering a competency evaluation. She noted, actually, Mr. Deere is asking for that competency evaluation. She noted that the victims deserve to have that competency evaluation. The defense was objecting to it. The prosecutors in that case were asking for it. So I assume he is presently being examined by psychiatrists and psychologists at the federal level, and we'll see what they come up with.
Definitely. And then the other one is going to the Stout case. Like we said, I know this is pending, but just with that case, still continuing on, even after you leave, and like you said, Mr. Allen will be, handling that. Yeah. Any kind of final thoughts that you have, kind of leaving in regards to the Stout case and how this all started, the media coverage, or anything like that you'd be kind of willing to share with us about that case? I'm
not going to talk about that case because I can't. Obviously, in a big case, you want to make sure you're putting the right resources. Part of my job is just delegating resources of where we put extra resources, where we don't. Whether it's types of crimes or specific cases themselves. That's a case that I'm going to make sure we have the right resources on. I chose Michael Allen to be the lead on that. I'm very confident in him. I think Michael Allen will serve this community very well going forward. An example is putting him on that case. He's an experienced prosecutor. He knows how to handle homicide cases. The community can feel very good about him being the next district attorney, but the family members can feel very good about him being on the Stout case.
Excellent. And then, sorry, I'm just going to go to my list real quick just to see. We talked about that. Talked about the future aspirations.
Yeah, probably ought to have more future aspirations than just
a
fly pole at a golf club.
Do it. Yeah, no problem with that.
I'd like to throw in travel, but nobody's doing that these days.
Nobody's traveling right now, right? Yeah, exactly.
I'm just hoping you make it longer than I did, right?
Right, there you go, right? Before we get back into it. Let me ask you, just because, like you said, you feel like you've never worked a day in your life, even when you kind of are in that retirement phase and kind of doing nothing, are you really going to still have your ear, tuned to those kind of things? I mean,
my wife certainly saying, yeah, I'll believe it when I see it. Although she's a little bit worried. It's probably beginning of summer, probably Memorial Weekend. We had our 3-day weekend there, and she looked at me and she said, "Are you going to be like this all the time on that extended weekend?" But I'm looking forward to it. She says, "I'll believe it when I see it." So.
There you go. We'll just have to see. And then kind of going more into the specific cases, if that's all right. Another thing that we wanted to talk about that's still kind of ongoing is, and this is a question the station sent to me, is what do you hope will happen next in the Greer Partita case? That's something I haven't really covered most, so I'm not too familiar with it. But I believe that's still kind of going on right now. What are we hoping that kind of happens next in that case, if we can't even comment on it?
I can't comment on that case.
Fair enough, fair enough. And then here's another thing that they wanted me to ask as well, but I'll open it kind of with this question. One of the first big stories I covered was, of course, the Patrick Frazee case going to Teller County, all the media coverage surrounding that. With that kind of, being concluded and everything, what were your kind of thoughts on that case just in general, from the disappearance to what all happened within a year? Everything kind of, going through the system and everything like that.
That was fast. Kelsey Barrett's case, I typically remember more by the victim than I want to honor her certainly more than him. I've done a lot of homicide cases and a lot of high-profile cases and a lot of very emotional cases, kids' cases. That was one of the most emotional ones I've ever had. And I have to say, I kind of sat back thinking to myself, why is this one so much more emotional and hard to do? And I think part of it was you had that time period when she was missing and you were hoping to find her alive, and you start to attach to her as a live person, and you get to know her family, and you get to know, and everybody's looking for her. Certainly as the evidence was developing, because of experience in the law enforcement, we knew things are not looking good. But you just never know, and we're all human, we're all hopeful. And so when we really knew we're never going to find Kelsey, that hit me harder, I think, than almost any other case, because this person really is dead. And now all I have is a homicide. Normally when I go out to a scene, we already have the homicide, and we know we're just preparing for prosecution. This one, we're hoping to find them alive, hoping to bring them back to her child. Hopefully everything will be coming, and it didn't. In terms of that case went to trial very, very fast. And we had thousands of pages of discovery. Even in the last 30 days, we were getting thousands of pages that we were giving out to the defense. Normally, they'd be asking for a continuance. They did not. They wanted to keep us on a tight timeline. I don't know if they were wondering if we could get it done on that tight timeline with all the evidence, because you have to remember, we're dealing with Woodland Park, we're dealing with Colorado Bureau of Investigation, we're dealing with FBI, actually my own office a lot, Teller County Sheriff, all these people and all these reports coming in, all this information on cell towers and cameras, and there was just a huge volume of information. I wonder if the defense thought they had a home field advantage, that Patrick Frazee grew up in that community, and they never did ask for a change of venue. Obviously, there was all kinds of publicity about it. In the end, he didn't have a home field advantage. It was one of the fastest. Believe me, if you look at my card key records, you're going to see I'm in here every weekend as we're getting closer and closer to that trial, trying to prepare that case. And if you're not seeing my card key here, it's because I'm up in Woodland Park doing the case up there. So we put a lot of time and effort on a very fast timeline, and I thought the team presented a great case. I thought Jennifer Veman did a fabulous job. Beth Reed did a fabulous job. The whole team did a fabulous job.
And you were talking about how that feels, it was a very, kind of emotional for you. Like you said, it's the whole thing about Kelsey missing, hoping we can find her, and then unfortunately turned into a whole different situation.
Oh, huge tragedy.
Any other cases that kind of come to mind that had that emotional grip that maybe, was one of the big cases we discussed earlier, or maybe one that wasn't really covered in the news or anything like that? Anyone that kind of really did have that emotional impact for you? One
that lasted a long time, too, was Jennifer Romero's son. Gina Romero was killed in a gang killing a number of years ago. That was probably late 90s. Off the top of my head, I'll say 98, 99, something like that. It was a drive-by shooting, and actually they were intending to kill another gang member. They instead killed the wrong person, 13-year-old Gino. That particular one was actually one that I've been very close to Jennifer and her family for a number of years since then. She started Mommy's organization after that, Mothers of Murdered Youth. That was one that was kind of a lesson in how to break down a gang, because I had the two gangs involved actually met and said, if you keep your mouth shut, we'll keep our mouths shut, and going forward. So trying to break that code of silence. Derek Graham is probably one of the best investigators I've ever worked with, Colorado Springs Police Department. He and I, every Wednesday night, were at the grand jury, bringing in gang members, bringing in family members, bringing in witnesses for almost a year. I don't know of any grand jury that's gone that long every single Wednesday night trying to break it. In the end, after a year of that, we end up with 12 people charged with perjury. Out of those 12, I think I got convicted all 12. I think 3 of them turned state's evidence. From those 3 now convicted perjurers, we're able to now start bringing criminal charges of murder, conspiracy to murder, and things like that. That was a multi-year event to break the code of silence and get justice. 2 of the people have never been charged, 2 involved in the actual shooting itself. One of them we just got from the FBI was killed not a couple of years ago, I think, down in Mexico by the drug cartels down there, which can be pretty gruesome stuff. They say both have, but we're not sure on the second one. Right. But that case probably convicted almost 20 people. But I still have, I saw Jennifer just a few months ago, and still have very close ties with her. But that's one that, yeah, your emotions are right there. You get to know the family. She's actually tried to take sort of that lemons to lemonade. She started that organization, which helps a lot of people, that meets a lot of these families sometimes right out at the hospitals and stuff. Actually, there's a section of the cemetery that you see a lot of the kids buried over there, and mommies and Jennifer take care of that area and make sure it's taken very well care of. It is very emotional to walk through that section because a lot of the cases I know.
Right. And you said, you were just talking about, bringing in the gang members and a lot of legwork going into that. Let me ask you this, kind of another big, just wide question in all the cases that you've been a part of. What would you say has probably been the most difficult one that maybe took the longest and had like the most legwork? Because any of that kind of comes to mind. That's
probably the one that took the longest in terms of kind of working through a couple of years just to get to the point of being able to prosecute a case.
Right. And then, sorry, let me go back to the list here.
With the constant work. I mean, you do have some that anymore in our modern DNA and modern sciences, we're solving cases today that have been decades old.
Right.
And cops are working on those cases periodically, but that continuous work would have been that one.
Right. Any case that you're particularly proud of to come full circle and get the conviction or, be able to defend? Any kind of case that comes to mind that you're particularly proud of? I know it's kind of wide because you've done so many.
Proud, right. Because you do feel, part of it is you're just trying to seek justice.
Right.
But there have been a couple of cases that I've actually taken to trial, gotten convictions where no other prosecutor was willing to get on the case. So you sort of have a pride in that you sought justice in a case that was difficult, but still got that. But I don't know that one sticks out. Every one of them is important to me. So.
Exactly, yeah. So. And then, but kind of going to the flip side, any cases that you wish could have gone differently or could have done differently, where you have that hindsight of like, oh, why didn't I do this, or anything like that come to you?
Yeah, you wouldn't know it, but I'm an introvert. You have to play an extrovert in this role, but I'm an introvert, and you just learn to deal with things and over time. But part of the introvert is that when I do a mistake or I have a bad verdict, I think about those quite literally for years later. Or even when I make a decision, sometimes I'm second-guessing myself years later. Why did I do that? I got to tell you that when I first started, when you were put into a felony courtroom, you handled every case that went in there. Now we have some special units. I've got a special unit that just does sexual assaults. That unit, what we found office-wide when it was everybody doing them, we lost more of those trials than we won. And quite frankly, the DA ought to win about 75% of the time. When we put that unit in, we now win more than we lose. It's not the same percentage still because those are difficult cases. As a generalist, if you will, when we had everybody doing them, I was actually very good with rape cases, very good with sexual assault cases. I set some law. Actually, it's kind of fun that some of the younger attorneys are citing law in cases or cases that I handled.
There you go.
Then I'll say, oh, I know who did that one. That was me. I'll digress for a second. I actually have one. I was doing a murder case, and a particular issue came up, and I cited to the judge a case. I said, well, Judge, this case is right on point. You should rule this way. And I'm standing there talking to, making my argument to the judge, and I went, oh, wait a minute, in front of the judge. I said, that's my case. I handled that case. It was actually Kerry Dorr, which you would know, but he walked into Planned Parenthood and held the place hostage. It's now, some prosecutor put out a training saying the 10 cases every DA should know in the state before they go into the courtroom. It's one of the 10 cases that everybody should know because of the positive case law for DAs in that one. Wow. I think I had 2 on his list, something like that. Did you get that? But anyway, I digress. We were talking about...
Just just talking about kind of, what kind of you would have done differently or anything, just kind of looking back.
I'll tell you the first rape case I lost. I still think about that one from time to time and how I failed that victim. But one of the things I failed that victim on is I hadn't prepared her for the fact that we could lose. Because I've been doing so well, I think one of the things I bring to the courtroom is a real sincerity. I think I was getting a little too, I watch other attorneys being polished and doing these, and I tried some of that, and that's just not me. It's not my style. But I should have prepared her for the fact that this verdict is not a referendum on her or whether she was victimized, that we have a certain burden of proof beyond a reasonable doubt. So a juror can come out of there and say, I think they were guilty, but not beyond a reasonable doubt. And I should have prepared her for the fact that it's a referendum on the case I'm putting on. I mean, I've made the decision, justices, this person should be found guilty because they did the crime. But when I'm in there presenting, she's just one witness in my presentation. And I hadn't prepared her for that. And so she felt it was a referendum on her personally. So I took a lesson from that of, I need to prepare these because I did not prepare her, and I'm really here for her in the end. And I got to tell you, rape victims are special. When someone is willing to come forward and tell us that they were raped, that is very tough, and it's something that they should be very. I think they're some of the bravest people you could ever meet. I'm very proud when they're willing to do that. I've had cases where I've had a rapist that later I'll have other women come forward and say he raped me, but I wasn't willing to come forward. Because to take the stand and be cross-examined, to be asked about intimate things in your life in front of a whole bunch of strangers, that's a lot of bravery. And that victim needs to be supported, and I didn't do it there.
Going back to the Kelsey Barrett case, specifically Crystal Lee, is there any more details you'd like to say about the plea deal your office made with Crystal Lee and the Kelsey Barrett disappearance?
I'll probably be repeating what you guys saw, that we did a deal with the devil. I mean, there's just no ifs, ands, or buts about that. It is a part of my profession, not part of the profession I'm necessarily proud of, but we do know that you look at any particular case and you've got to decide who is my target here. I would like to hold everybody accountable at the appropriate level, but sometimes you got to give something up to get your main targets. With that case, obviously we want to get the murderer. We don't care who the murderer is, we want to get them. Once the evidence clearly shows Patrick Frazee did it, it's how can we get the evidence to do that? Certainly working very closely with law enforcement, talking with the FBI, talking with the chief of police in Woodland Park. We knew that we had Crystal Lee out there. We knew we were building a case on her. So the question is, can I build a case on both of them and successfully prosecute it? And it was our opinion that we could not. So that was why we gave a deal to Crystal Lee in order to get Patrick Frazee. Now, she's in prison today, but she didn't get near the justice she should have gotten, which is just wrong. But I can tell you we got the justice on the murder in this case.
Considering the disparity of arrests in Colorado Springs based on race, arrest rate of 279.5 black people versus 81.7 white people per 1,000 residents, did you draw more cases against black people because of that disparity?
Sure. I do not think there is systemic racism amongst law enforcement or prosecutors, certainly locally or across this country. But I think race is a very important issue that our society needs to deal with and talk about and get out there and make sure it isn't part of our system. Right now, a lot of people are pointing it at the judicial system. I've been very active in this for a long time. We had a local diversity committee. I was chairman of that committee, co-chairman for a while here locally. I was involved with the statewide diversity committee. I certainly have been involved in efforts to get more diversity in prosecution, which our real problem right now is we're not getting minority kids into law school. My CU and DU have 2.5% of their student body is African American. So if I'm trying to get African American kids as lawyers here, I'm competing with law firms who want the same thing. Our society is obviously, that's way below our society level, and I'm competing in a pool of 2.5%. So I've been active in trying, even at times in my career, to get high schools. We've had our prosecutors in some of the higher minority schools helping put together mock trial teams to get kids interested in becoming prosecutors, to become lawyers going forward. But what's happening right now is society is looking at the judicial system. I can tell you for at least 20 years, if you look at who committed the crime, and you ask the victim were they black, white, Hispanic, or other, and they tell you what it is. And then you look at who's arrested, black, white, Hispanic, or other. And then you look at who's convicted, black, white, Hispanic, or other. And then you look at who's in prison, black, white, Hispanic, or other. You will find that it's almost the exact same percentage that committed the crime, that are being charged, that are being convicted, and that are serving in prison. So if as a society, we are dealing with racial and social issues. But if we're going to target and think, oh, look, because of this person's race, I'm going to be more lenient on them in the criminal justice system, you're missing the target. You have to ask, why did that person commit the crime in the first place? What are the societal things here? And if I think I can solve that by giving easier plea bargains or different plea bargains, you're wrong. And in fact, some DAs have tried that. The Milwaukee DA came into office saying any misdemeanor petty offenses that have overrepresentation by minorities, I'm not going to prosecute. His crime rate skyrocketed. His murder rate skyrocketed into the top 5 in the country. You have to deal with the person who did the crime and hold them accountable. The flip side of that is everybody wants to look at the defendant's side. When I go to diversity meetings or trainings, I'll ask the person who's putting it on, can you tell me what the victim is? And they'll say, oh, I haven't studied that. At least 80% of the time, the victim of a crime is the same race as the perpetrator. If I'm going to say I'm going to treat a black man more leniently because he's overrepresented in the criminal justice system, I'm turning to that black victim and saying, you don't matter. And that's wrong. That's just wrong. Now, if I want to get back to what is the #1 common denominator, if I go into prison, you might think it's drugs. You might think it's alcohol. The #1 common denominator is not spending a single day in the household with their dad. It's the breakdown of the family. That's what's affecting our crimes across the country. So when I watch in Chicago where they have open gang wars, you know their solve rate got down to 5 to 15% on homicides. But every time a young black man is killed in Chicago, I've just put another family with a fatherless home, and I'm perpetrating the same problems that we have going forward. So I can tell you that statistically, demonstratively, that there is overrepresentation in the system, but it's not overrepresentation of who commits the crime. Our society has to deal with that, and this isn't the quick fix. By the way, for whatever it's worth, the last time, I think it was 3 years ago, the state has a mandate to study the different judicial districts across the state of Colorado. The last one I know that they came out with was about 3 years ago. I got to tell you, there's some huge statistical inaccuracies in it to let you know that. But the 4th Judicial District, which is my district, we were the only district, as far as I know, that showed that we had overrepresentation of whites in the prison system. So what, I think some of that statistical anomalies that you look at any given time doesn't tell you if we're getting justice on each individual case.
Right. And then just kind of sticking to this topic of,
so the person who brought that up, I don't know, 3 years ago, we actually showed too many whites in prison.
Right, yeah, no, I'll be sure to.
For whatever that's worth.
Gotcha.
I don't think that means that much. I think my job is to do justice in each individual case. And if I'm doing that, there are things that the DA can do, like we have second chance programs, diversion programs. Actually, our diversion program was lauded as taking a lot of the minorities out of the criminal justice system and treating them a different way in a study they did a few years ago, to kind of give you an idea. But we're treating cases here.
Perfect.
Not social issues.
Just talking about kind of the change that Colorado is going through. We had that sweeping police accountability bill that was just passed, and one of the things that was involved in it was the fleeing felon, and that kind of relation to the Devon Bailey case. We heard lawmakers saying that the reason why they wrote part of that was because of the Devon Bailey case, and if that could have been in effect when that happened, could have possibly been a different story of the grand jury. I don't know. I'm not an expert on the matter, but just with the change that Colorado is currently going through with our lawmakers coming up with these, police accountability bills and things like that, what do you think is kind of going to be the future for Colorado if we kind of keep going on this trend? Do you think it's going to be a good thing, a bad thing, hold more people accountable? What are your kind of general overview thoughts on that?
I'll try to remember to hit both your topics. One is Devon Bailey that you kind of put out there, and the other is just where we're going.
Yeah.
I got to tell you that law enforcement is always scrutinizing itself, and they're always looking for better, more efficient ways to do things. They invented a lot of things that our legislatures are only now getting on. You know, it's sort of like we started diversion with our law enforcement officers 30, 40 years ago here. Only a few years ago did they passed a law later saying we could have diversion programs. Law enforcement started with neighborhood policing. Let's get into the neighborhoods. Let's get to know the people and let's get to work with them. Later, legislators said, oh, you ought to be doing things like that. They are constantly looking. They have review committees. They have IA. They have, after any incident, they're reviewing, do we have a problem with this officer, our system, and things like that. So everybody's looking for ways to improve, and I got to tell you, law enforcement's in the forefront. Nobody minds looking at ways to improve. Quite frankly, to a certain extent, our society is now getting anti-cop and anti-prosecution, and they're basing it on just a few cases across the country, in most cases that never happened here. Devon Bailey did, but they want to take George Floyd and say, oh wow, we want to change everything in the country based on George Floyd. I have very good law enforcement here. They're highly professional, they're highly trained, they're highly educated, they do a great job. They're out there putting their life on the line every single day. Right now, officers are putting their life on the line for you and I right now, because those things can happen at any time that they go bad, and they do a fabulous job. Some of my legislators, and quite frankly some of the bill in 217 is just anti-cop. They're changing things here in Colorado, such as they're now allowing a liability in lawsuits that no other state and union is allowing. Well, if I'm a police officer in California looking for another job, or I'm in Illinois, or I'm in New Mexico, why would I come to Colorado where they're passing anti-cop laws? And they're preparing to do more anti-cop laws up there already, if you haven't seen that. And some of these are strictly just anti-cop, and that's just wrong. These police officers are dedicated to what they do. They're very good at what they do. They are dedicated to a thing greater themselves, public service, and putting their life on the line, and they don't deserve to be treated that way. Devon Bailey, that law, it didn't get rid of the fleeing felon. It just changed some of the fleeing felon elements, number one. Number two, the grand jury just didn't find fleeing felon. And quite frankly, it isn't fleeing felon in Colorado. It's always been a fleeing armed person who has committed a felony, a dangerous felony beforehand, before the officer could use force. So this fleeing felon isn't correct. It has to be a felony that, under the old law, that the person did a felony that was a deadly weapon, endangering people, has a weapon and is fleeing, and putting the officer in danger. But the grand jury also found that they acted in self-defense. They just didn't find one, or they found both. They said that the officers were acting in self-defense. They got to, you know, this is 12 people that are randomly picked almost a year before they saw that case, had no idea that was coming, weren't on some commission where you're picking, well, let's get one DA and one public defender and one from this organization. They were randomly picked from our community. They're there, and I can tell you, I've talked to a lot of grand jurors over the years, and I say, what do you want the public to know about your service? Because it's a 1 year that they serve, or longer. And they always consistently say, we want them to know we wanted to get to the truth. We wanted to get to the right answer. And those people are committed to that. So this random group looked at that evidence, also has, they actually are the ones leading the grand jury at that point. They can tell the cops, I want you to collect this evidence, or present this evidence, or bring in this expert. And they're the ones who said the officers acted in self-defense. That wouldn't change under the new law. The officers acted in self-defense. I guess I will say, you know, what's unique about this job is you're going out and putting out your resume to you know, several 100,000 people to say, do you want me as your DA? You do really feel as an elected official that it is a real honor and privilege to be entrusted with this position for 4 years. And then you've made promises that what you're going to do, and you try to act on those. But you know, in any job, there's also things that are thrown on you, like COVID this year. How are you going to handle COVID, or how are you going to handle, you know, Tom Clements or any of these others as we go forward? You do feel a responsibility. So it's been an honor and a privilege to serve the people of this community. Obviously, I mentioned before, I came into this thinking I'd be here short term, and I fell in love with it. Certainly, being the DA is sort of the pinnacle of what I could do in this position. I hope the community feels that I've followed through with the promises I made to them, and that I've handled the situations I didn't expect well, or at least the best I could. We're always trying to do the right thing. But I want to thank the community for giving me this opportunity. It really has been an honor and privilege to serve this community, and it's been very rewarding for me, and it really has allowed me to do things that you know, are greater than myself, and work with a lot of great people. So I want to thank the community.
Excellent, sir.